Revelation chapter 3, starting at verses 14 through 19. I've brought us here now at this point because it is so highly relative to everything we're talking about. We've reviewed this before in a video series entitled Ye Are Gods. But for any of you who are unaware, the way that I'm trying to inform you, share this information with you, get you to see this, that Jesus Christ is talking about this the same way that I'm describing it. That this is a very deep truth. This is a very deep secret that has been hidden from the very foundations of the world. And these are biblical truths, that it is a biblical fact that Jesus Christ is revealing these secrets that have been hidden from the foundations of the world, and that he is requiring his believers to shout these revealed secrets from the housetops. How many people do you see doing that? I don't see anybody doing that. I don't see anybody doing that at all. And I think the ones that I do see trying to pretend to do that are doing just that. They're pretending. They're not giving you anything close to where all of this is, co-joined is one thing. Not just simply unified, but yet harmonized. You can unify many things without understanding. You might not understand what something is, but yet you can see that if you have 100 of the same thing together, you can say, okay, it's unified. But if you realize that each one of those 100 things has an individual perspective, are those things harmonized? They wouldn't be. They wouldn't be. So unity and harmony basically occupy the same dimensional potential, but yet they're separate things on that dimensional plane. Unity and harmony are not the same things. Harmony is the potential of unity, but the potential of harmony is not unity. Because unity you can have, for instance, and I'm being serious here. I'm not just trying to get philosophically deep, make this all deep, cool sounding. I'm being serious. Take, for instance, when I'm saying unity is not harmony, take, for instance, take organizations, take cults, take the Klan, the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan has unity amongst their Klan members, but they're not in unity, especially not harmony, with other races outside of what they deem to be Aryan, right? You can take it on the other side of the fence. You can take the Black Panthers. For the Africans, same thing. They might have unity, but they don't have harmony. Okay, so it's very different. It's there's a lot of things like that. It's easy to become completely confused when you're really not having the educational standard set correctly for the youth in this world. As you're being brought up, you're not being prepared correctly. You're being taught how to, sorry this is kind of running on here, but you're taught how to work for the system. You're not taught how to overcome the conditional environment and achieve the close to perfection status that you have that potential to do. Okay, you're not taught that, of course not. You're taught how to be a cog, a wheel, a spring, a nut, a bolt, or a screw in the machine. And you're to perform that task, and if you stray outside of it, you're no good no longer. Okay, so the unity that they're trying to put you into is a box. That's the unit. And you see units that are given codes, like a UPC code, like a barcode and a symbol. And when they want to unit you, they want to unify you, really what they're trying to do is separate you. When they're trying to unify you, they are really actually breaking you down into smaller and smaller and smaller egocentric organizations of um, the same psyche, of the same mind of man. They are breaking it down into all of these different things. Okay, well, you're a from my relative perspective, let's say, well, you're a skateboarder, or you're a bodybuilder, or you're a naturalist, or you're a swimmer, or you're a musician, or you're a this, or you're a that, and then you begin to find out that you can only be with so many things simultaneously before some of these things are diametrically opposed to the other. as far as the offered interpretation of these things to us, from the world itself. My point is that's how they quantify you. They're not qualifying you. If they were qualifying you, if they were bringing the quality out of you to qualify you to stand on your own, to become and be your own, to be basically the captain of your own salvation, you know, by choice, by choosing the correct directional path which has been shown to us by Jesus Christ. So what they need to do is they need to quantify you. By quantifying you is what putting you in units is. And a unit is where now they can apply a statistic to you. And then once they can apply a statistic to you, they can predict you. And then they can predict and orchestrate events based upon your unity. What do you think Facebook was all about? What do you think the internet is as far as an informational gathering tool? You think it's an informational dissemination tool, but in all actuality, it's an informational gathering tool. They are gathering information, and at the same time, they are quantifying the information, and they are basing it into secular units, denominational units, if you will, of ever smaller and smaller egocentric, quantifiable, titleable things, if you will. And you guys are being grouped into things that you're not even aware of yet. And then this is an equation. And then this equation has a predictability. And this predictability allows them to basically control the world stage. So, I mean, I'm just, I say all that because that's how deep this stuff really goes. That's how real this is. That's how what the mirror is. When they're talking about the mirror and you look at their avatars and it's like a little girl looking at an apple and then the apple's already bitten or it's not bitten in one, it's all about that. It's all about, is this evil really good? Is this good really evil? From which way are you seeing it? In all reality, I'm going to tell you one thing that is eternally good that will never be evil, and that is loving one another. That can never be flipped and put in a mirror and said that it is entertaining some sort of dark faction simultaneously as it's co-joined to the good. I can tell you now that light and darkness are separated, that they are not one repercussion of the other. Darkness is a repercussion of the light, but the light is not a repercussion of the darkness. You don't turn on a darkness switch. You only turn on a light switch. And then once you turn off the light switch, therefore, the darkness now is by default. Okay, the absence, everybody knows, the absence of light is darkness. But it's not the absence of darkness is light. You just don't take away darkness and then light therefore appears. No, because darkness is dependent upon the light, but light is not dependent upon the darkness. Therefore, Gnosticism crumbles and falls before the simplicity of the truth, before what the truth really is, before what has been lost by the common sense perspective of man. Just simple common sense would reveal that to you. Okay. I'm sorry I went on so long. let's get down to business here. Okay, Revelation chapter 3. Now, yes, Jesus is talking about gold in the same way that I'm talking about. We've been talking about this gold that was what? That was tried by fire. We've revealed the process. We've made the connection with Revelation chapter 13 that describes this fire coming down from the sky. It's a deceptive fire. It's being brought by him. Who is that him? It is that Ephraim. It is the he that is known as the high hand of Ephraim that we see in Hosea. And it also describes in Hosea that Ephraim should be planted in a pleasant place while he brings his children to the murderer, right? Which will be synonymous with what Jesus Christ was talking about in the book of John, where we were trying to look at that verse for 44, where Israel's father is this devil, the murderer. And that would be what we know, that Israel, being the adulterous wife, the harlot, has now taken this new God unto herself, in which now the children, in a sense, become adopted in. You know, it's really intense. And we see that this stepfather, you know, we say that that's, when you see that now in modern times, it's called a father-in-law. Is not Yahweh the God of law? You know, everything associated with Israel and this law, you know, as Jesus Christ would understand, you know, it's this carnal law. You don't need force. He doesn't use force, you know, to get you to see the merit of spirit living and spirit righteousness. You know, he's not going to destroy you and outright obliterate you because you don't realize the eternal truth of love your neighbor as you would love yourself. And so many people don't, you know, but then we see no railing accusation is brought against them. They're allowed to live their lives, but yet they will stand in judgment for that one day. So this God is based upon a God of force. And we see that these carnal laws, they use force to get people not to kill other people. And we know that now we live in a world where if there was not these force laws with these stiff penalties of pain and death, imprisonment, that a lot of people would be running around thinking it was right to kill people. They would be just taking people out left and right because they had different color hair than they wanted them to have. Different color eyes, or they were wearing freaking a pair of shoes that weren't appropriate in that neighborhood. I mean, we know what that's all about. So that's the simplicity, the common sense understanding of what Jesus Christ says, is that, look, if you're living under carnal law, well, then you're still basing your life off of force. You're still basing your life off eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, when he says, no, love your enemy, turn the other cheek, be merciful. Be merciful. Go that extra mile if you're one of the true disciples, if you're one of the ones. So it's common sense once again. It's just it's so easy. It's incredible common sense here. So, all right, I'll try to bring this together here. Jesus Christ is saying in verse 18, I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire. All right, that's how relative it is. Revelation chapter 3, starting at verses 14 through 19. Look at the opening of the message here. The message to Laodicea, the final state of apostasy. Now, if I say the word here, if I pronounce it incorrectly, I apologize. I don't listen to people that talk about this stuff. I only know about it from my own experience with it, and therefore I pronounce it how I read it at the time. And I admit my pronunciation is most likely horrible. Anyway, I do know this. This final state of apostasy is relative to what we're in right now. When we're talking about this message to this church of the final state of apostasy, it's what we see is responsible for this great falling away. It's everything to see that we see with this false YouTube movement that is associated with this Jewish traditionalism that is pumping nothing but these fallen Israel ritualistic doctrine interpretations of prophecy, which is giving you their version of what they expect. And of course, it's everything bound in with their psyops concerning Revelation 12 and this remnant being lifted to this supposed refuge, this safe place that we now know is interpreted better as Shinar, another capital for Babylon. Of course, Israel, Mystery Babylon, the harlot, it's the same thing. Is that not what Babylon is considered? That harlot, right? That rideth the beast? Okay, who would the beast be? The beast has to be the fallen prince who has now come into material form, which would be the beast number for 666. If 666 is the carbon form for man, and man is also he himself a beast, citing Ecclesiastes, right? If man is also a beast, and then his number, now the number of man is 666. So that's 666 would be 6 electrons, 6 protons, and 6 neutrons, the carbon atom. What does the fallen prince want to do? He wants to enter into material form. That would make this beast that the whore is riding, it makes it the fallen prince seeking to enter into material form. But it also has layers that are reflective of the political and the cultural and the consumer-based interpretations. It most certainly does. But these are all only there when you view them from your own relative perspective of reality determination. You know, how you were determining reality based upon your acquisition of knowledge, your assimilation of knowledge, how you understand and apply that knowledge. If you get to higher levels of understanding, therefore the materialization of the understanding based upon the observation of the world around you begins to change to the reflection of the higher understanding also. And you can begin to see more and more when in reality most people see nothing at all. So the message is to this final state of apostasy. Apostasy means descent. It means abandonment. It means backsliding. It means infidelity. It means a form of all of this in relation to religion. It means perversion. It means unbeliever, dissenter, traitor, insurgent. It means abandon, to be faithless. You know, to abandon. Woe to the idle shepherd who shall leaveth the flock. To abandon, right? So this final state of apostasy is being perpetuated by this mystery religion that has spread the globe, that is associated with these secret societies that we see are infiltrated, not only infiltrated the truth movement, have actually started the daggone thing. They've actually started the daggone thing. It's their thing. If that's not evident with the sheer number of channels that are a part of the total psyops of this, wool over the eyes of the masses. If you got to pull wool over your eyes already, guess what that means you are? It means you've been turned into a wolf. Because you would be a wolf in sheep's clothing, right? If you had the wool pulled over your eyes, that means you're not a sheep. Okay, you never were a sheep. Now you're having the wool pulled over your eyes, that makes you a wolf. That's what the wolf is trying to do, is trying to pull the wool over his eyes as the costume to become the terror, to infiltrate and destroy. And then, of course, they think they're going to rebuild. It's incredible. So this state of apostasy is the final state of apostasy. This is the message to the final fallen church, fallen religion, mystery spirituality of our world, this state of apostasy that is directly related to this Ishtar concept, which is now being seen in the reflection of the synagogue of Satan. And you would see that if you would read verse 14 through, and I'll read it for you now. And unto the angel of the church of the Laodiceans write, these things saith the Amen, the faithful and true witness, the beginning of the creation of God. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would thou wert cold or hot. Listen closely. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. Okay. They're lukewarm. That's the Leviathan. That's what we saw with the sine wave, the symbolism with the sun snaking up and down along the ecliptic. right? And of course, they're basing all this off astrology, and this is the interpretation of the signs. And we know that Jesus Christ has said that this generation would not receive a sign, save for a prophet like Jonas, right? And he declares that greater than Jonas is here. I wonder what all that means, right? Or maybe you should wonder, and I already know. Maybe I'm trying to help you understand. I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou. So then, because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Now that would be that checkerboard from going light to dark, from good to evil, okay? From cold to hot. And then it's the same thing that we saw with the monatomic gold fractal, the lab experiment, the repeated heating and cooling of the substance. Okay, same thing we're talking about. And you're going to see in verse 18, same thing. He's talking about it. Okay, and he's talking about it in perspective to these unbelievers that have fallen prey to the apostasy of this great last days church that would be Mystery Babylon. There would be Mystery Babylon that is associated with these secret societies that we now see, running rampant through the truth movement, basically, with the wool pulled over their eyes in so many ways. So then, because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. Because thou sayest, I am rich and increased with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. Now, whether you understand this is in perspective of them being on the moon. Because this is them where he's talking about it in Luke chapter 11, where Ephraim is that strong man that has these riches. He's this armed, strong man. And then he says that, he's basically Jesus saying that, yeah, Ephraim's going to be all good, as long as there's not one stronger that doesn't come upon him and spoil his riches. So this is what he's describing here in the fullness of this, but it also has relativity to the different generations that have lived and fulfilled this perspective as it's led up to this, has it not? But of course, this is the last days, the final apostasy, the final great abandonment. In so many ways, it has to fulfill itself with the abandonment of the idol shepherd as he abandons the flock that he has been leading incorrectly, trying to lead them into the pit, his very own peoples, as Hosea would say, describing Ephraim. These are his own peoples. He's seeking to lead his own children to the murder. But it's in a twofold manner, is it not? Because the remnant is also being led to the actual murderer in relationship to the moon scenario, okay? And then we see that the children of the nations that are being deceived are being led to the murderer, which would be the judgment, the roll that's being sent from the moon, from Shinar. So, can you see all this? Can you see all this? Because thou sayest, I am rich. Of course they're saying they're rich. They consider themselves to be that treasure, right? They consider themselves to be these golden ones. And increased with goods, are they not Babylon? Has not Babylon been lifted up? Israel, thy mother, Ezekiel 19, that blood vine, okay, that has corrupted these early sons of God, which would be associated with Israel's early princes, because Israel sees itself as a descendancy from there. So when you read with a discerning eye Ezekiel 19, you got to see that the early princes of Israel are being related back directly to Genesis 6. And they believe themselves to be this rich, this treasure, exactly as Jesus Christ has interpreted them in the parable with verse 44. Because thou sayest, I am rich and increased with goods, and have need of nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. Of course they're blind. They're following a God that can't see out one eye and is blind in the other. And then this fulfills the parable of the blind leading the blind, and both shall fall into the pit. Right? I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire. Here, once again, Jesus Christ is putting himself up against this false manna, this the elixir of life, this philosopher's stone that has tempted the children of men in a incorrect way based upon this reprobate mystery that we first learn about in the book of Enoch. I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, right? Moses was trying the gold in the fire, right? And then he also got the children of Israel to eat it once he strawed it upon the water. Biblical fact. Okay? All right? So Jesus is saying, once again, not this manna. That's not the bread that I'm talking about. That's not the bread that I'm referring in my personal interpretation of the Lord's Prayer. Jesus' interpretation of the Lord's Prayer. They would revert and contort that interpretation of the Lord's Prayer and have you believe that now it's talking about this sheaf of bread, this manna bread, this powdered gold. When you know that no, serpents eat the dust of the earth, right? Is not gold a dust of the earth? Is it not a stone of fire turned up out of the earth? Quoting Job. Oh man, I can't remember which chapter it is in Job. We covered this in a series entitled The Gold Mystery. So Jesus is talking about this, and it's in perspective of who he's talking about. It's in perspective of these ones that believe themselves to be gods, right? The apostasy, the great falling away, everybody that is joining this mystery Babylon Kundalini rising serpent deception, which is nothing more than a simple temptation that is really quite sophisticated, but at least the plainness of what it is a temptation, because it's the very same thing that you see offered in the story of the Garden of Eden event, in a childlike mannerism with nursery rhyme type metaphors. I mean, how much more simple does it need to be for you guys to realize, how simple does it need to be for you to realize the complexity of what we have before us? For an oxymoron, I guess. As always, we need to simplify the complex. As always, that's what it's really all about. Because really things are so large and our understanding is so limited in so many ways. You have to be able to, if you want to realize what's going on, really outside of your mind, things are happening all at once, okay? You have to put them into perspective in a linear sense. But in reality, everything's happening out there at one time. And if you're talking about trying to retain information for what's really actually happened, you've got to be processing information very quickly. Very, very quickly. And this is what, where it says knowledge will increase. Of course knowledge is increasing, but that's also a good and a bad thing if you can't assimilate it, if the knowledge is meant to confuse and distort. So as they say, raise the vibration. Raising the vibration also is raising the distortion, is it not? Because when you raise the vibration, you raise the decibel. When you raise the decibel, you raise the volume. You raise the distortion. You exceed the potential for the vessel to produce the melody in a harmonic capacity. Okay, and that's why you see people that are receiving what they believe to be as high truth, but they can only spew it in a dogmatic, selfish, hateful way. They might have all sorts of high knowledge, but it's only being translated due to the distortion, the inability to actually grasp what this knowledge really means. This now creates the distortion, and then everything about that knowledge becomes an abomination. Okay, knowledge is only, in all reality, knowledge is only what you have acquired between your experiences in overcoming the environment around you. That's all it ever will be. Ever. Okay? Knowledge is data between you and the environment. Recorded data. Okay? Any knowledge is based upon reactions between you and the environment. Okay? Any knowledge. It's just plain and simple. And that means so much if you were to explore it further. And you will always find that information will lead you back that there's a higher source of knowledge than man himself, meaning man's not his own creator. Man, therefore, is not God. Okay? If you have been brought about by something else, therefore, you yourself are not God. You have to be existential with that one eternal creator, of which we know that Jesus Christ is existential with the one and eternal creator. He says, any that have seen the Father, any that have seen me has seen the Father, for I and the Father are one. It's also relative. So, as he says, I counsel thee to buy of me, he's counseling these that are associated with this work, this lukewarm work of going between cold and hot. In other words, good and evil, the checkerboard. All right? Everything associated with this satanic agenda, this Luciferian. And they hide that cleverly. Let's look at the next line. It says, let me read this in continuation from verse 18. I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich, in white raiment, and thou mayest be clothed, that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear, and anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayst seest. He's talking to somebody that does not see. He's talking to somebody that's blind. He's talking to somebody that's blind. Okay, these, of course, are these associated with these idol shepherds. Okay? These blind in one eye can't see out the other shepherds. They're walking around, got their hand over one eye. I mean, okay, they're blind in one eye. Well, spiritually, they can't see out the other. Because the spiritual truth is always the highness of the truth. If you're going to find yourself evolved in eternity, you always find that eternity is involved in forgiveness, in mercy. And it cannot be paradise without it. You people who cannot realize it and seek to become judge and jury, hangman over others. Wow, I tell you, you don't understand the type of judgment that we're supposed to give. We're supposed to give this judgment mercy and truth, right? Mercy and truth, not force, not greed, not carnal law, but spiritual law. Okay? And then Jesus Christ says all the time in the world to wait for those until they do see it. Until they do see it. Nonetheless. So anointing with eye salve to make them see. They don't see. So as many as I love, yes, he does love them. I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous therefore and repent. He is talking to this final mystery Babylon apostasy church in the last days, in reference to repentance, everything that we've spoken about, as he describes them as these lukewarm leviathans that are associated with this ancient work of the house of gold. Yeah. I mean, yes. That's how relative it is. You know, that's the type of Bible studies we're doing around here. That's the kind of stuff you might not have ever known if you didn't chance this channel. And then by the time you do get this information paraded before you, you better believe that it's been twisted up. And then it's been wrung out of any truthful fountains of the Spirit of truth. They're going to wring it out. They're going to twist it up. So as you can see that Jesus, he's not no serpent. He's not condoning none of this. He's not condoning Gnosticism. He's not condoning none of these things. He speaks out against them in the sense to where he understands where they come from and what their misalignments are. And he also respects the ideals that they present and the truths that they're seeking after. Therefore, he does not condemn them on their search for truth. He just condemns the type of searching that they're doing and continually says in the most simplest of ways that he is the way. That he is the way. That he is the way and not this material substance to a spiritual truth. Gold is material. Regardless of its refinements by an electrical process of some sort of high heat, it's still going to be material. Regardless of the plane of Charon, theoretically, where it disappears to another alternate dimension, it is still associated with the material realm in its dimensionality. It does not go to the spiritual realm and there's floating gold portions, just aimlessly floating amongst the spiritual peoples in a different spiritual dimension. No, it's not. Okay? These are theoretical hyper conclusions that cannot actually be proven in the sense of the field of Sharon, where this gold seeks to go to this alternate dimension as it would be viewed in a modern lab. It disappears. It actually disappears. Okay, not only that, as I said, the substance begins to levitate in the pan. It actually causes the pan itself to levitate. So all of this is just, wow, if you can realize, I'm having to kind of realize this at the same time, and talk about it to you. And then kind of tone myself down, that's what I see I got to do right now. Okay, so let's bring this back in here. Once again, Revelation chapter 3, verses 14 through. Read this on your own. Compare this to the chart that I show on the sun, the declination of the sun along the ecliptic, which is revealing the symbolism for the Leviathan, also known as the sine wave, which we know Satan is associated with the prince of the powers of the air, which is what the sine wave is showing you, which is all associated with this frequency and the rays of vibration, which we know that is about breaking the seal. This manipulation of the information to distort your free will of choice, which now causes you to repolarize, you to re-religion, you to fall away, you to abandon any common sense logic that you would have as a loving, trusting child, and a few simple truths on this world, and now you've accepted some sort of sophistry, some sort of over-complex, under-justified, over-rationalized, misaligned malarkey based upon doctrines of vanity that are so outwardly contorted in their introversion of egocentric ideals that is not saying that you yourself are a god, while you're actually in one of your lowest forms, your animal form creation, your material form creation. You're a creature form. You are a creature that has been formed from the dust of this earth. That is a good thing, okay? It's not a bad thing like they want you to believe. Okay, so if you were saying that, you're a god while you're still really evolving, you're still evolving just basically materially here. If you're blind in one eye and can't see out the other, come on. So people have the spiritual journey on this world has stopped thousands of years ago. Spiritual evolution on this world stopped thousands of years ago. It's most certainly collectively, absolutely culturally, and we only see it proceeds individually, right? But yet these individuals are not units. They're in harmony with the entirety of the whole. They cannot be unified and segregated, classified, ethnically determined. We won't allow it. We don't allow racism. We don't allow these things to take place. We understand the discerning common sense prerogatives between the races, and we adhere to those common sense laws, but we don't condemn the races that are. We only urge them to become more. And then we know that Jesus Christ has provided an infinite universe for that to take place, and that we ourselves are not going to become the judge and jury of anyone based upon doctrines of men. Are we? Or am I speaking to a lot of people who really are? Maybe I've gotten a little more philosophical here than I should have. But is it all relative? Am I not being honest? Am I not showing you things that are real? Okay. And it's all in perfect perspective of everything that we've already talked about thus far. Okay. Okay, so now you see that. Retain what verse 18 is telling you. I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire. Once again, Jesus Christ is offering himself plainly and truthfully, offering himself in the stead of this material gold dust, that we see that the serpents themselves are the very first few chapters of Genesis are declaring that are going to eat. You want to be a serpent? Come on. You want to be a mischievous, sly, deceptive serpent? I don't. I don't. I want to be real. I want to be real. I want to be loving. I want to be kind. I want to learn to do all that. I want to get better at it and know that I'm not the best at it now. It's a continual journey. The vanity begins when you think that you've already completed it and you yourself are some sort of God. Golly. All right, let's take a pause here for a moment and get back to the science. And I do apologize for taking so long. Okay. And when I listen to my own videos, sometimes I do get frustrated. As hard as I try, I have a hard time, though, just trying to get this out like quick or rushing it just to get to the point for that point. It's not what it's about. I got a train coming. Give me a moment. Okay, I'm going to speak a little louder here because of the background noise. Back to the book. And I'm going to start reading here at page 23. Returning once again to Moses and the mountain, we discover the actual bread to which both the Lord's Prayer and Bethlehem refer. It appears, returning once again to Moses in the mountain, we discover the actual bread to which both the Lord's Prayer and Bethlehem refer. It appears in Exodus chapter 25, verse 30, and is called shewbread. The prefix shew is no more than an obsolete spelling of show, and the bread's original description gained this rendering from the English 16th century Bible translator William Tyndale. He noted it was shewbread because it was in the presence and the sight of the Lord. A better translation would have been bread of presence, or presence loaves, as it is correctly given in the Septuagint, 1 Kings, 1 Samuel 21:6. In the Old Testament, Exodus chapter 25, verse 29 through 31, relates that the shewbread was made at Mount Horeb by Bezalel. All right, very important. Okay. Grasp what you're hearing here. This term shewbread is also the manna. In a very diligent search of the understanding biblically of what shewbread is, who makes it, where it's made, what it's described as, will prove that. And then that's the verses that this is showing you, that this is one and the same as the manna. As you see, Moses himself strawed this gold upon the water after treating it with heat of the fire, and caused the children of Israel to eat it. We're not messing around here. We're telling you the actuality of these things that would fulfill what all of this means about them being lifted up with this rapture that you can see as a fractal in its understanding of the very same lifting up of a portion, the 44%, the remnant of this gold. It's astonishing, really. It's absolutely astonishing. So now that you kind of know what that really means, also understand Mount Horeb is this Mount Serebit. Mount Horeb means the wilderness mount. It is the Mount Sinai. As I said, the correct Mount Horeb with the interpretation, the correct directional path of travel that Moses and the Israelites took through this great wilderness, you will find that Mount Serebit is the correct location. Mount Serebit is the place that actually has that temple, which is the Egyptian temple that, for all intent and purposes, for modern academic reasons, should not be there for modern academic presentation of information. It should not be there. But in reality, the correct biblical interpretation would reveal that, yes, Egypt was in control of those lands at that time, and it is absolutely correct that the Sinai region was under control of the lands of Egypt, and that they should have had this ancient refinery there due to its strategic location for the process of this substance and the places in which they were gathering it. All right? So what we see is that Moses, at least in the story as it's presented to you in the Bible, by bringing the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt, at least in this case physically, they did not. They did not. They were maintained themselves within the land of Egypt, and in fact actually visited a high ancient Egyptian temple / refinery to do some very peculiar and special things that are so duly recorded now under much mystery. Okay, so in the Old Testament, Exodus 25, chapter 25, verses 29 through 31, relates that the shewbread was made at Mount Horeb, meaning the shewbread was made at Mount Sinai, people. Okay, so you've been told the interpretation of really this bread coming down from heaven. They don't tell you that it comes down from a temple. They don't really tell you that Moses is up on the mountain on a temple. They tell you Moses is up on a mountain speaking to God, basically, this flaming representation of the Father. When in all actuality, that's not what's happening. Moses is at a refinery, and then we see that this refinery, like all these temples at these times, were basically open air. These temples were cyclopean blocks that were very high voltage ceilings that in most instances had the air readily rushing through them. This is what caused the manna to be distributed, this powdered like gold substance, like a fine powder, with the dew of the morning around the camp of the Israelites on the plateau down below. In the Old Testament, Exodus 25, 29, verse 29 through 31 relates that the shewbread was made at Mount Horeb by Bezaleel, the son of Uri ben-Hur. He was said to have been filled with wisdom. Now we know that that wisdom was associated with the symbol of the caduceus, which is that serpent rising upon the staff. Understanding and knowledge. We also learn that Bezaleel was a skilled goldsmith and a craftsman in all manner of cunning works. That very important word, the emphasis on cunning. Exodus chapter 35, verses 31 through 33 is your biblical support. Who was placed in charge of building the Ark of the Covenant and the tabernacle. In detailing how Bezaleel should manufacture various crowns, rings, bowls, and a candlestick, all of pure gold, the text adds shewbread to the list of precious items, and without further explanation, the process is seen to be completed. Interesting, because all of these things, crowns, rings, bowls, candlesticks, are very hot topics, prophecy-wise, and even metaphorical in their manifestation, at least in their interpretation of these prophecies as we see these things happen around the world. When we think about the movie like The Lord of the Rings, what we know about with the candlestick from Luke chapter 11, verse 33, this candlestick being hidden in the secret place, now we know that is the field where Isaiah or Zechariah was talking about in chapter 5, being that it was Shinar. And I think in chapter 4 he describes it as being that candlestick, once again, that they lit, which fulfills all of this. I mean, all of this is absolutely on point. So we notice that the process ends with this cunning work, this manufacture and the processing of gold with the shewbread. In essence, it's the highest work of this cunning work, which is bringing this gold to this monatomic state, which is now being described as bread. You know that manna is described as bread. You know that manna is described as bread by Jesus Christ. And that at the same time, he calls himself that true bread that came down from heaven, which would fulfill the truth of what I revealed to you in Revelation chapter 3, verse 18. Okay? The sequence is later recalled in the New Testament book of Hebrews, chapter 9, verses 1 through 2, which states that at the Sinai covenant there were, within the holy confines of the tabernacle, a candlestick and a table with the shewbread. At the Sinai covenant. Okay, now this would be have to relate it now to the Sinai temple that we're telling you now is the temple Hathor, which now fulfills the description why it was described as this frost of heaven, which is then further related as the hoar frost of heaven. Okay, even describes it as a small white round thing. The book of Leviticus, chapter 24, verses 5 through 7, returns to the subject of Bezaleel and the shewbread, stating that the loaves, now as talked as loaves, were wiped with frankincense, but and astutely pointed out in the 1950s by the Russian Jewish but as astutely pointed out in the 1950s by the Russian Jewish psychiatrist Dr. Emanuel Velikovsky, the shewbread was obviously not of flour, but of silver or gold, all the way back into the 1950s. Okay, and then we see that within the 1970s is when they begin to actually understand this process in a modern laboratory, and they were able to repeat it. But yet this has not been repeated to the masses in reflection of the greater spiritual interpretation of this material confusion concerning gold. So was obviously not of flour, but of silver of gold. In making this observation, he drew particular attention to the Egyptian treasures of Pharaoh Thutmose III, as reproduced in a bas relief in the temple of Karnak, in the metal section described as cunning work. There are a number of cone-shaped items. They are explained as being made 1 cone of silver and 30 of gold, and carry a description, white bread. White bread. All right. Let me continue reading further. It will explain itself. Sacred manna. Still at Mount Horeb with Moses and the Israelites, we discover more biblical references to a mysterious white substance. Exodus chapter 16, verse 15 states that when the children of Israel saw it, they said one to another, "It is manna," for they wist not what it was. And Moses said unto them, "This is the bread which the Lord hath given ye to eat." No, Moses said that, but that's not true. We find out that that's not true is even what Jesus Christ says. Subsequently, manna is described as being white, resembling seed, and with a sweet taste like honey. Exodus 16, verse 31. Now, the sweet taste like honey would fulfill the mystery, at least the beginning of the mystery of the understanding of Judges chapter 14, verse 14. The Dan's riddle, the riddle of Samson, that describes that out of the mouth of the eater shall come forth meat. And then, of course, we know that he describes this honey is all connected to this. And you would have to review that to see how this is also related to this inheritance of the earth that is commonly called the Golden Age. And then this is where we get the reflection of that, at least viewed from that perspective, if you know that portion of it. And then this is a whole world of information that you can now process because you're aware of that one-dimensional avenue to view it. And then if they keep these things from you, you become basically narrow-minded. You're not. We're supposed to travel a narrow path, but with a broad mind. We're supposed to travel a narrow path, but with a broad mind. We're not supposed to travel a broad path with a narrow mind. That's disaster. And then we see that that's exactly what they're trying to get everybody else to do. It's so easy. All right. Subsequently, manna is described as being white, resembling seed, with a sweet taste like honey. Now, remember the Dans are associated with bees, and you can see where the symbolism begins to become connected to them, because also the Dans are serpents. And if the Dans are serpents, and they're trying to achieve a longer lifespan by eating this monatomic gold, now the symbolism would shift to bees, would it not? And then these bees would need this honey. Therefore, Judges chapter 14, verse 14 would fulfill as I say it does. You know, and I don't mean to be so blunt about it. Sometimes it's just, It gets a lot to say all this stuff in an hour here. Turning to the Antiquities of the Jews, as compiled by the Jewish historian Flavius Joseph in the 1st century AD, Joseph explains that the manna was first identified when it lay upon the ground, and the people knew not what it was, and thought it snowed. Therefore, hoarfrost of heaven. He continues, so divine and wonderful a food was this. Now the Hebrews call this food manna, for the particle man in our language is the asking of a question. What is this? Now it's interesting because it says the particle man. I mean, I guess, maybe they're saying the part of this, in association with man is now he's saying that this is what it's describing. But it's also unique because you've got to realize man is also created from the dust of the earth. And then we see that there's almost like a falling away from the original dust of the earth for the acceptance of this new dust of the earth, which would be this gold of the earth, which is going to promise you more than what Jesus Christ could promise you from the original potential of the dust of the carbon atom. You know what I'm saying? There's like some weird treachery that goes on there where they're even rejecting their own estate, their own creation for this fictitious creation with this fictitious golden egg of some sort of, dopey goose, that is not produced, and it's not going to produce. Now the Hebrews call this food manna, for the particle man in our language is the asking of a question. What is this? Some of the most important biblical and non-biblical records have been preserved in the writings of Flavius Joseph, whose Antiquities of the Jews and Wars of the Jews were written from a personal standpoint. He was the military commander in the defense of Galilee during the Jewish revolt. Against the occupational forces of Imperial Rome in AD 60s. The sweet-tasting white substance which appeared round the mountain in the mornings, and which was referred to as bread, was therefore called manna. What is this? By virtue of its unknown origin. Well, in all actuality, it was only unknown to the children of Israel. They were being newly exposed to it. But Moses himself knew exactly what it was, and then it's proved that he actually knew how to reproduce it. When he begins to expose their idol, their gold, to the fire and straws it upon the water, then actually asks the Israelites, commands them to ingest it. Moses is highly aware of this process. He comes from the temple in which this thing is being created. But to the Israelites, they're the ones that are saying, what is this? Remember, Moses is not an Israelite. Moses is an Egyptian. The same question also appears in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the oldest complete book in the world, alternatively known as the Papyrus of Eni, a royal scribe. This 18th dynasty scroll from Thebes, acquired by the British Museum in 1888, is extensively illustrated and around 76 feet in length. In this ancient ritualistic work, the bread of the presence, isn't that interesting, is called Shefa food. And the Pharaoh, seeking the terminal enlightenment of the afterlife, asks at every stage of his journey the repetitive question, what is it? Now this is, an ancient Egyptian situation. They have already asked the question very long ago of what this gold is. Now we see that by the time it comes up to Moses' day, he himself is actually a master craftsman that is able to readily produce this substance. Other books of the dead, though fragmented and incomplete, date back to the 3rd millennium BC, and it is clear from the Cerebit reliefs that the Egyptian kings were ingesting white manna of gold from around 2180 BC. Very interesting date. I'm not going to get into dates, but I would give the date a much earlier dating. However, only the metallurgical adepts of the mystery schools, the cunning craftsmen, knew the secret of its manufacture. These adepts were operational priests, and the high priest of Memphis held the title of Great Artificer. So, if you understand the account, in full with Moses and the children of Israel around the mount, that Moses himself also manufactures this, proving his cunning as an Egyptian craftsman of these very cunning works. knowledge was being passed on, and then of course Israel, from a portion of a Hebraic root, was being fused into this. Okay. Now, I try to give you a little bit fuller information on the science, the comparisons to the biblical verses, a little bit about the Bezaleel person, and then you saw the history that this shewbread is being made, reported to be made at this Sinai region. So it's all there. Okay, and then it can be fulfilled in modern archaeology with what was discovered actually at this temple refinery, Mount Serabit, which matches absolutely geologically description of the Sinai region. Even has the lower plateau for an encampment of, many Israelites. Okay, it's all there. It's all there. The only thing that's not there is people that have the understanding. So now view all of this and then view it in. I would almost call them despondent at this point, in a way, if you understand that word, where you actually just go crazy when something calamitous happens. I mean, it's like their state is worse confounded than it originally was, as he describes. Look who he's speaking to, and then look what the doctrines are that they're preaching and spreading. This Jewish traditionalism is bound up in all of this. And then look who is using Jesus Christ but to do nothing but to preach Jewish traditionalism. And that's not what Jesus Christ is doing. He is preaching the will of the Father. And that has nothing to do with Jewish traditionalism. As we see, Jewish traditionalism is steeped in the lore of the fallen prince. And we see that Israel's followers become that murderer. I mean, it's heavy-duty stuff, is it not? It's heavy-duty stuff. Think about the movie The Field of Dreams. With Kevin Costner and everything. The tagline, build it and they will come. We've already shown that that's virtually pulled right out of to build it and establish a base in the land of Shinar. And then we have the tagline for the movie is build it and he will come, build it and they will come. It's all based upon this cornfield, with this interesting return of this ghostly White Sox, right? White Sox. What are we talking about? These Karnak Brotherhood, this White Brotherhood, this House of Gold. The White Sox. Are you kidding me? And then they're playing on a baseball diamond. And we know that diamonds are made from pressurized carbon, okay? And we know that this pressurized carbon would now be they themselves. And then we know that that is still even further associated with one more fractal observation of how they believe themselves to be created in a godlike state. Israel thinks it is the wheat corn. That's obvious. So that becomes relative to what Jesus Christ has shared that, it's Satan who seeks to divide the wheat and the tares. He says he's not going to do it because he doesn't want to damage, he doesn't want to damage the true wheat. But we see Satan has no problem with that. His whole entire plan is to damage the true wheat, right? And then they're going to the dark side of the moon. The pineal gland itself is the size of a grain of corn. Google that. The pineal gland. So the pineal gland is what? The third eye. And they believe that this is what's going to be open and they're going to be illuminated in that sense. And this is, a pineal gland is the size of a grain of corn. And this fulfills them with their connection as the children of the corn. It fulfills them with this idea that they become this dry measure of grain that is devoid of the water, the fountain, the word of Jesus Christ. And now they become associated with this dreamland. They become dreamers. They become the true sleepwalkers. They're immersed in this darkness. The only thing that they can do is dream of a reality that is based upon, an inactuality of truth. which now itself becomes an abomination of what truth is. If the reality is going to be acquired by murder and deception, can't spin it any other way. No matter how much heat you add to it, you can't change a turd from being a turd. You know, it's not golden to commit murder. Nobody needs anybody to tell them that. But I think that when you have people that are reinforced in rigid doctrines that have blinded them to the common sense truth, the moral integrity that we are to have between the experiences between ourselves with each other, that is an absolute that's an absolute no. It's an absolute abomination. You know, we get that Moses, the very lawgiver to Israel, is given laws that says, thou shalt not make no graven images, but then Moses is making graven images ordained by this very same supposed God, right? Because Moses is made to make some brazen serpent on a staff. That's a graven image, is it not? And then Moses is required to be associated with the creation of the cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant. Is that not, or he's in connection with the cherubim of the Ark of the Covenant? Is that not connected with the cherubim? I mean, is that not connected with graven images? Yes, it is. There are absolute contradictions within all of this. But the only thing that does not ever contradict is the truth of Jesus Christ within it. So as they expose the Bible with contradictions, notice that they apply that expose also to Jesus Christ at the same time. Well, they become liars, because there is no contradiction within the word of Jesus Christ. None. Zilch. None. You'll find none. The same yesterday, today, forever. He asks anybody who can receive, anybody is true. He says he wants mercy and not a sacrifice. Go findeth what that meaneth. Neftali, you got a pretty big YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure you watch my videos. I know a lot of your subscribers do. I know a lot of you people that are really connected to Jewish traditionalism. I mean, your name Neftali is associated with the tribe of Ephraim, you know? So, I mean, it's a part of the fallen lost tribes, right? So, you know, it's weird, you know? So if Neftali, if you're sincere and you're looking for a greater expansion of truth, I mean, what do you think about all this? You know, Neftali, I don't even know what your full YouTube channel name is, but I definitely plan on addressing you here shortly in a video and presenting some information to you and seeing what you think about it. So nonetheless, you know, we know where they're going. We know what they're doing. We know who's doing it. And we know who's trying to keep it off from you. I'll be back.